Welcome back, everyone, to Hardee and Steve Watch Star Trek. We are watching episode 3, Where No Man Has Gone Before. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing pretty well. It's Saturday afternoon, and I'm happy to report we watched this episode twice. The first time, we watched it on Paramount Plus in the modern remaster edition of the TV edit, so it was shown on TV as the third episode in 1966, and it was edited from its pilot form. It was the second pilot that was made after The Cage, and we also watched the original pilot edit, which is found on the Season 3 TOS Blu-ray, Disc 6 as one of the add-on features. And so we saw, in the second time around, we saw some cut prologue and a few cut scenes. The later parts were mostly the same, but it was nice to watch it twice and to see the differences, and in particular the original effects.
It was created by Gene Roddenberry, as everyone knows. It was written by Samuel A. Peoples and directed by James Goldstone. The episode starts out as they are going to cross the Great Barrier at the edge of the universe, which
galaxy.
And you didn't think that was possible because...
Yeah, I mean, the galaxy is a cluster of stars bound together by gravity, and if you fly away from the stars in some kind of spacecraft, then you'll just encounter fewer stars and eventually leave the area where there are stars, and then eventually leave the area dominated by our galactic gravity. So in the Star Trek universe, there's this great barrier at the, quote, edge of the galaxy. In reality, there really isn't any such thing.
What brought this to the captain's attention, in this case, it's Captain Kirk, and it was a damaged ship recorder from the SS Valiant, an Earth spaceship lost about a couple hundred years earlier. And in it, there was an order by the captain to self-destruct after a frantic search for more information about extrasensory perception, which brings in one of the characters, Dr. Elizabeth Daner, a psychiatrist whose concentration is on ESP. And what she says is that ESP is not something that we should fear. It is something that, a fact, as she called it, that some people have in various amounts percentage-wise.
So her character is upfront very defensive about this, as if she's encountered hostility to ESP before. And we can see in the crew records they go through, everyone has an ESP rating. And of course, ominously, the two highest on the ship are Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell, who we see sitting at the helm, followed by Daner herself.
Interestingly enough, the actress who plays Elizabeth Daner, her name is Sally Kellerman. She had been nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress from the movie MASH. And Gary Lockwood, who played Frank Poole in the 2001 A Space Odyssey movie. And I didn't know if you knew that. I hadn't seen that. But I don't even know if Frank Poole is a main character. I think they said co-starring. But anyway, so he plays Gary Mitchell, who is just a crewman in this episode and is a friend of Captain Kirk's from the Academy when Captain Kirk was teaching there. So there's some history between those two. And as they are going to investigate more about the SS Valiant and, again, go to this area where there was damage to the SS Valiant at the edge of the galaxy, they are hit by what is like a magnetic space storm incident, which knocks Dr. Daner and Dr. and crewman Gary Mitchell unconscious.
Yeah, so it kills a few other crew members, and the ones who survive are the high ESP rating ones.
Which was Mitchell and Daner. So when they did this, They were knocked unconscious, and they were sent to sick bay. And at this point, Dr. McCoy is not there. There's Dr. Piper. And Dr. Piper is examining Mitchell. And he seems to be fine, except his eyes have turned silvery. And Dr. Daner seems fine and very kind of casual, leaning back against the wall, clearly composed and relaxed. So it didn't look like there was much effect on her personally. It was the silver eyes that Gary Mitchell had, and just kind of this underlying feeling of menace, just, underneath the surface, as he's still talking to the doctor, and also he fakes a death briefly in order to gain sympathy from Dr. Daner. Yeah. And what was your take on that?
Well, so he essentially tricks her into listening for his heartbeat, and when he says, "Haha, I'm actually not dead," she's leaned in very close as if for a kiss, and we see the very forced attraction. Like, they're supposed to be attracted, but I don't see it. I think you didn't see it either in their behavior.
I don't know if there was supposed to be something romantic. I didn't think that there was, but I think you said that you thought that they were supposed to be romantic.
Yeah, I think the plot was signaling that there should be attraction because they're the special ones.
I disagree, because I don't think that... I think there might be... I think you were right in the fact that she was defensive, but I think it's just her general bond and care for people with extrasensory perception, and how they might have trauma bond over being different, and that was something she cared about. But I didn't sense any romantic feelings from her, at least.
Yeah.
Do you think that he had?
No, I think it was like that. She had this care and this compassion that was, sort of willing to bring her closer, not romance, except that for him it's like, hey, hot doctor, pretty much.
Yeah, and you know what? He was willing to use his telepathic and telekinetic powers to lure her into his sphere of influence, if you will. And in fact, his behavior had not gone unnoticed by Spock, who I think you mentioned that he is starting to blossom as the person that he will become later.
Back at the beginning, we meet Kirk and Spock having a game of chess, and they discuss Vulcan logic, and he says, I have a human ancestor, rather than, my mother is human, as we learn later. But they use the chess game as an intro of Kirk's maybe a little bit more emotional in his choices, whereas Spock is focused on coldly winning.
Right, and when the issue comes up about Gary Mitchell and his perceived growing animosity towards them, and almost his corruption with power, absolute power corrupts absolutely, was mentioned in there. Science officer Spock is very logical. He's like, we have to rid ourselves of this problem. We should just dump him on a remote planet.
Yeah.
And this is where, for half a second, Captain Kirk has a case of a conscience and moral dilemma where he's like, well, he's my friend, or, we were friends. I can't just leave him there and desert him. And
Spock says, well, you could kill him.
So that we can stop this person from taking over. I mean, Spock had concluded that the SS Valiant had probably been destroyed to avoid a similar fate where someone with extrasensory power had absorbed too much energy from whatever storm that they had engaged in. So without knowing anything more, Spock believes that they don't want to end up destroying the ship with what they had, so they just wanted to take Gary Mitchell to the remote planet of Delta Vega, which is a lithium
automated mine. And of course the ship is broken, right? So they don't have a lot of choice about where to go. But Spock supplies, actually, we can maybe fix the ship with the materials available at this mining station. So conveniently, it's a place we can get to, mm-hmm. It's a place we can maybe fix the ship, and it's a place we can try to maroon Gary Mitchell.
And they have a meeting, and the only person who was not a male at that meeting was Dr. Diener, and she voiced concerns and defense of the idea that Gary Mitchell, may very well be a nice person. In fact, just because he has absorbed all this power doesn't mean he will do something bad with it. Even though we have seen signs and this foreshadowing from the music and the mood that this is a lost cause that she's fighting for, but she is given these lines that she has to sort of sell, like to, a room full of men who are her colleagues, who may or may not already see her as inferior because she's a woman in a male-dominated field. So, she had to walk a very delicate line there, trying to still, be as tough as the men and still convey her message, which, Captain Kirk didn't care so much about. He was brusque and reiterated that, he's the person in command, and, he is not going to, put everyone at risk just for this hope that Gary Mitchell is going to be contained, I guess.
Yeah, he kind of talks over her and says, "No, here's Spock out." And Spock's point is he's going to find us annoying and see us as useless insects and crush us like he would a bug.
And similarly, maybe Dana had self-preservation in mind, because the twist is that she herself has absorbed powers, and it's just been a slow pace in which she would gradually also have as much power as Gary Mitchell. And so when they're transported onto the remote planet of Delta Vega, Gary Mitchell does what we think Gary Mitchell will do. He, blows a fuse and takes out the captain and Spock temporarily as he dangles the idea of paradise that he and Dr. Daner can create on this planet, by creating a Garden of Eden-like thing with trees, made of fruits that they can eat from and have this idyllic life.
Yeah. The Eden reference is blatant. And he says, "We're hungry, let there be food," and it's apple, of course.
Magically it appears.
Psychically it appears.
Yeah, but you know what? Daner, to her credit as an actor, she doesn't give away much in her expression. She doesn't give away that she is enamored by Mitchell. She doesn't give disgust vibes either. She's, almost like she's a blank where you can, put your own thoughts.
She's taking it in and hasn't decided yet.
Mm-hmm. So when she does see Captain Kirk, because Captain Kirk makes it to their Garden of Eden with this futuristic rifle that he's going to use on Gary Mitchell, they have an exchange where he says to her, "Where's his compassion? If he can be all powerful and so forth, but what we can't have is a world without compassion." And she sees this as a truth, and she tries to help him. However, Mitchell gets back on the scene, and for some reason, there's a fist fight.
Well, before the fist fight, there's a psionic fight with hands, and we get to see
right.
we get to see how both of the actors have quite large hands. Both Gary Lockwood and
Sally Kellerman.
Sally Kellerman. We saw Gary Lockwood's hands earlier, and I kind of fixated both when he was standing, like in the transporter, and in the lean-in in the medical bay, where he's like kind of gonna grab her shoulder. You see his hand in the center of the shot, and like that's a really large hand for his body.
Well, is it the same hand seen in Space Odyssey at the end? Was that his hand? It's like,
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't think.
I
I think
never
it's the
saw
other
that
guy
one. Okay.
that he plays.
Okay.
But this one, it seems like maybe it's the camera, but I think it's him. His hands seem disproportionately large for his body. And then in the psychic fighting, where they're blasting each other, they're making casting gestures. This is a podcast, so you can't see what I'm doing with my hands. But
it's pretty cool. The hands going forth and twisting, and they must have really practiced it.
It looks choreographed, and both of their hands are large. So it's a sight to behold.
And it seems that the hands play like their own character roles. Again, even with all this psychic ability, it still comes down to fists, bare knuckle fist fighting, which I read that was what NBC liked about it.
Right.
It would grant permission to have this.
We read in the lore that one of the reasons why The Cage was rejected by NBC as a pilot was it didn't end in a fist fight, and this one delivers. Too cerebral. So this one, after the psychic fight between Mitchell and Daner, turns into a fist fight between Mitchell and Kirk.
Yes, and we know who wins there. And
Kirk wins by guile, of course, because Mitchell, once he gets his psychic powers back, can overwhelm Kirk, but Kirk is realizing, aha, I'll get my hands back on the plasma rifle, and I won't shoot Mitchell, I'll shoot the rocks, and Mitchell will be focused on me, and he won't react to the rocks in time.
Well, they both end up expiring on this planet, Mitchell and Daner. But Captain Kirk gives them their due. He says that let it be noted in their records that they died in performance of their duty. However, justice for Navigator Lee Kelso.
Yeah, Kelso also died in the performance of its duty.
But he never gets mentioned again.
He gets strangled by Mitchell telepathically manipulating a cable.
Yeah.
And we don't hear about Kelso again.
Right.
And contrast this with Captain Pike, who is very upset about losing people. Kirk is like, whatever.
It's a matter of course. I think that's what they were looking for, a hero who, has to make tough decisions, and at the end of the day, Kelso doesn't make a noted performance of duty. Maybe they meant to. I think for me, that this being like the second episode that extrasensory perception is highlighted, I'm thinking that this was the topic of the day. People wanted to know more about it. People were interested in it. I find it a little bit like X-Men, Marvel.
Going in that direction.
And I don't know if it's connected with anything beyond that. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, in Star Trek, there's, telepathy is canon. Vulcans are telepathic, and so are Deanna Troy's species, the Betazoids. There's a bunch of telepaths in Star Trek. We met them in The Cage, the telepathic image projectors in the whatever they're called.
Nowhere to hide from your feelings and your thoughts, it seems.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting contrast with what we later have as canon, that there are psychic powers, but taking in a very an understanding of that sort of thing from the perspective of 1960s popular psychology. I'm fairly sure there isn't really any serious studies about ESP anymore. But at the time, they were in vogue, and they were serious science.
People have ranked this as one of the top original series episodes. And what do you think?
I think it's pretty good. I'll give it a 3.5. There are some flaws for me. I feel like it would have been nice to see some of the scenes between Daner and Mitchell a little bit less stilted and more interpreted, especially by the Daner actress. I think
Sally Kellerman.
Sally Kellerman. Yeah, the Gary Lockwood, I think, made interesting choices, and Lockwood's choice. Sorry, not Lockwood. Kellerman's choice not to react at all. It makes sense on one level, but also I found it a little bit boring.
I actually found that Kellerman, she's stuck in this kind of role where she has to play both sides. She has to be likable enough for us to see her as someone that would save Captain Kirk's life, and then also in line with Mitchell enough to think that they too would become the master villains on this planet. And I didn't know where her loyalty lied, and I think that's why she had to play that kind of ambivalence. But then that's not a really likable quality if you see that that's happening, because you really want, certainty. You want to know where you stand with this character, where this character stands in relation to everybody else. And so I the more I think about it, the less I like this episode. Originally I was thinking to give it 3, but now I'm leaning towards 2.5, because I think it was kind of simplistic, and it kind of played with tropes a lot, like the ESP trope. She's a woman, so she represents the compassion, and then I was confused because the captain said, "Where's his compassion?" But then it's like, "Where's your compassion, Captain Kirk?"
Yeah, his compassion was arguing with Spock for half a second before deciding that Spock was right.
So, also, I believe that Gary Mitchell was a little bit menacing, and I think that you had mentioned before that he spawned a Chain of Akron game.
Okay, so I'll cover this really super quickly. There's a Dungeons and Dragons live play out there on the internet, The Chain of Acheron, dungeon mastered by Matt Colville. It's on YouTube, easy to find. And Colville explicitly took this plot and put it into his game, and he even assigned to one of his players, go watch this so you'll understand what's going on. And the player, Tom Schmuck, had a disposable character at the beginning of the campaign named Nails, so the Chain of Akron is a mercenary company. Nails is their staff sorcerer. He gets exposed to a magical thing, and surprise, his eyes change, and the other players aren't in on what's happening, but Nails is becoming a god. It's exactly what happens to Gary Mitchell. And the other players at the table in real time have to come to the understanding that they have to wait for their moment and kill their friend. And it makes for some really cool drama when you play it out that way in sort of a live play with the hoodwinking. I think maybe even in some ways more compellingly than we saw in the episode.
Well, thank you for joining us this time, and we'll catch you on the next podcast.
Until next time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.